If you're not on the court playing against Boston or on the court playing against the New York Knicks, you should keep your mouth shut.
The Jimmy Butler trade rumors are legitimate after extensive speculation regarding his desire to leave Miami, stemming from Pat Riley's off-season remarks. If you're not playing against the Boston Celtics or the New York Knicks, you ought to stay quiet. Then Shams reported Butler wanted out, which his agent attempted to downplay.
I want to see me get my joy back from playing basketball. And wherever that may be, we'll find out here pretty soon.
Following Butler's absence from the team, we witnessed several lackluster performances and a peculiar press conference where he expressed a wish to regain his joy in basketball, regardless of where that may lead. Subsequently, both Shams and ESPN confirmed that Jimmy Butler has indeed requested a trade from Miami and is indifferent about his destination. This development places him at the top of the trade target list for numerous teams. Let's discuss which teams might pursue him, potential trade packages, and whether Miami is likely to act on this. First, we'll focus on a group of teams that are frequently mentioned in Jimmy Butler trade rumors, but have nearly no chance of actually acquiring him. The LA Lakers are first on this list. After their Dorian Finney-Smith trade and shedding D'Angelo Russell's contract, they essentially lack the capacity to match Jimmy Butler's $50 million salary in a trade due to insufficient contracts available. They could consider Rui Hachimura. They might consider Austin Reeves and a few other players, but essentially they would need to dismantle their whole lineup apart from LeBron and Anthony Davis just to align the contracts. Additionally, they lack significant assets on their roster unless they are willing to trade all their first-round picks to land Jimmy Butler. The Heat are hesitant to accept long-term contracts right now since they could simply let Jimmy leave, gain cap space, and find a replacement during the offseason. Thus, the Lakers are not likely to make a trade for him, although headlines will probably still surface. Another team I've mentioned repeatedly is the Phoenix Suns. Acquiring Bradley Beal's contract is nearly impossible. It's regarded as one of the worst contracts in sports, with a no-trade clause, meaning he must consent to any trade. You might suggest he could go to Charlotte or other teams with significant cap space, but it's doubtful Beal would want to join Charlotte. Unless there's an unusual situation involving De'Aaron Fox and the Heat agreeing to that, it seems very improbable that Beal will go anywhere. He finds himself in Phoenix. Then the last team is the Mavericks, facing a similar scenario as the Lakers where the contracts simply don't align. P.J. Washington or Klay Thompson would need to be part of the trade for the Mavs to match Jimmy Butler's salary, which doesn't make sense for Dallas. I believe these three teams have a virtually 0% chance of acquiring Jimmy Butler, but what about the teams that actually might? One under-the-radar team that has been frequently mentioned to me, which we haven't discussed in earlier videos, is Memphis. Acquiring Jimmy Butler would undoubtedly enhance their chances of contention. They are in search of additional star power, and it aligns with their team's ethos. The trade package could potentially include Marcus Smart, who must be part of the deal for financial reasons, along with Brandon Clark, Luke Kennard, John Conchar, and a first-round pick. Memphis could include extra first-round picks if desired, but I doubt they would proceed with this trade. It doesn't appear to align with their typical strategy. To me, it resembles more of a Cam Johnson team. They were pursuing Dorian Finney-Smith, but I don't think they are actively searching for stars right now, and I believe they would prefer to retain Marcus Smart due to the financial implications involved, along with Brandon Clark, who they likely want to keep too. I can't envision this happening for Memphis. It's a reiteration of previous circumstances where you must assemble several players from your rotation just to acquire Jimmy Butler. Additionally, you would need to negotiate an extension for Butler, and I don't see him fitting into Memphis's long-term plans. I don't foresee that acquisition for them. Now, let's explore some feasible options, specifically teams that might realistically trade for Jimmy Butler. First, the Sacramento Kings repeatedly come to mind. You could incorporate first-round picks if you wish. Certainly, Dion Carter is someone who was recently selected in the first round. This trade proposal would need to be constructed for the Kings to accommodate Jimmy Butler's salary. Malik Monk and Kevin Huerter must be included in the deal, along with Trae, while Dion Carter could aid in balancing the financial aspect, providing additional assets for Miami. However, even with that, this trade doesn't appear to make sense for the Heat at all, and I'm uncertain why Sacramento would want to part ways with Malik Monk. He's extremely significant to their squad. And then there's Darren Fox, along with DeMar DeRozan and Keegan Murray, who remains available as a potential asset. However, it's an unusual team dynamic, and if Sacramento somehow orchestrates a trade with Miami, I would anticipate that it would involve De'Aaron Fox possibly heading to Miami, instead of the Kings attempting to bring in another veteran star, like they did during the offseason with DeRozan. Nonetheless, the Kings continue to emerge in discussions, so I wanted to highlight them. Now, we move on to the big three realistic options for Miami regarding potential destinations for Jimmy Butler. These are the three teams listed in order of likelihood for acquiring him. At the top of the list are the Houston Rockets. They're the least likely because they've had ample chances to trade for Jimmy Butler since this situation began, yet they haven't shown much interest. There haven't been many rumors suggesting they wish to add Butler to their roster. And again, it's a similar scenario where several rotation players would need to be sacrificed to bring Butler on board and then extend his contract. Dylan Brooks or Fred VanVleet would need to be part of the trade for financial balance, and Steven Adams is also included as an expiring contract. Jabari Smith and Cam Whitmore are viewed as potential assets in this scenario, along with others. We understand that Houston possesses significant initial picks to enhance this if they wish to motivate Miami to engage again. However, I'm uncertain about Miami's enthusiasm regarding this trade package, nor does it seem Houston is particularly thrilled either. I certainly believe it's still a possibility ranking high on the list, but they would need to pique Houston's interest more than they have thus far. Following that in the likelihood ranking is the Golden State Warriors. We've discussed their trade package in a few previous videos, yet I keep mentioning it. The reason this trade fails to function properly is that the finances can't align, largely due to Andrew Wiggins not being included. Ideally, Golden State wants to bring in Jimmy Butler without relinquishing Wiggins, something they could have managed before acquiring Dennis Schroeder. Now, with Schroeder on board, they cannot trade his contract before the deadline, leading to circumstances where Wiggins must be included in the deal. The contracts listed on the left are insufficient, and they lack additional contracts to balance the salary. You could remove some of those players and include Andrew Wiggins to make the trade feasible, but for Golden State, does exchanging Wiggins and some assets such as Kuminga, Wiseman, or draft picks for Jimmy Butler significantly alter their fate this season? Personally, I don't believe it does, which brings me to, in my opinion, the most suitable team for Jimmy Butler to join would be the Denver Nuggets. This potential trade has been discussed frequently on this platform, involving only one first-round pick along with Michael Porter Jr. and some contracts. Denver could also include some pick swaps if desired, as they lack other immediate first-round picks. Miami would gain a player like Michael Porter Jr., which could serve as a valuable long-term asset for them while also unloading their obligations regarding Butler. However, Miami faces a challenge with this particular deal, as it would require them to take on long-term contracts, which complicates their financial flexibility. They could otherwise allow Butler to leave in free agency, creating significant salary cap space to pursue another player to replace him. This raises the question of whether this particular move is essential for Miami before the trade deadline, or if they might consider a sign and trade option in the offseason instead. If that's the trade landscape for Butler, there isn't a strong motivation for Miami to act immediately. If Denver can locate a third team willing to acquire Michael Porter Jr., Miami won't be assuming too much long-term salary. They could net some draft assets and proceed. This scenario grants Miami the benefit of gaining assets while avoiding a long-term salary commitment for Butler. They would receive something beyond what they might lose if Butler leaves for nothing in the offseason. However, Butler's hefty salary of nearly $50 million complicates matters because he aims to join a contending team. These contending teams typically don't possess a large, expiring contract like the Nets' Ben Simmons available for swapping in exchange for Butler. Their rosters are comprised of players like Andrew Wiggins and Dylan Brooks who are on long-term contracts rather than a $40 million expiring deal that would facilitate the Butler transaction. So, while it is indeed intriguing and thrilling that Jimmy Butler has officially demanded a trade, the Miami Heat have taken a firm stance from the very beginning, declaring publicly that they have no intention of trading Jimmy Butler. This doesn't necessarily rule out a trade possibility, but suggests that any offers must surpass what I've outlined in today's video to convince them not to let him leave as a free agent. Instead, they might consider renegotiating for a one-year deal to mend the situation and potentially part ways with him in the off-season, and create cap space. The only thing that counters this is Jimmy Butler, who can be quite harmful to the team if he decides to be, and that is certainly a possibility. There's a scenario where Miami generates a toxic environment that devastates their entire season, leading them to need to move Butler. I believe teams will likely bide their time, waiting for the situation to escalate to the point where they can obtain Jimmy Butler at a discount. Miami might end up accepting an offer they weren't keen on originally due to how dire the situation has become. Other than that, I don't think a deal is on the horizon despite the trade request, but I'm very curious to see how this unfolds from here.